Now, a new report from Washington Policy Center's Director of Public Safety Solutions reveals that 11 years into the LEAD program, claims on reduced recidivism and arrest rates, increased employments, aren't really proven to be true. There are some inaccuracies, according to Washington Policy Center's Eric Zimmerman. And so, if you're not familiar with the LEAD program, we have talked about it before, but this is the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. That's what LEAD stands for. And this is where someone who commits a crime and comes into court, instead of jail or even prison, might have an opportunity to take advantage of a diversion program. So you might be able to say, okay, you committed this crime because of your drug addiction. You robbed the grocery store, whatever. So instead of that, you are going to agree in lieu of jail, you're going to get into, drug treatment and you're going to enroll in whatever other kinds of therapy programs. You're going to take some job training. And that's been the push from Seattle, King County, Washington, and it has been replicated in many other states across the country, touting Seattle's supposed success rate for the LEAD program. But here is Eric Zimmerman again with Washington Policy Center. He also happens to be the mayor of Normandy Park. If you're familiar with him in that capacity, he only joined Washington Policy Center in July. So he's relatively new on staff there. But he conducted a pretty in depth analysis of the LEAD program. So I wanted to hear his take.
So LEAD stands for Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, and these programs became interesting maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Is a lot of folks were looking at, okay, well, what's happening with people coming out of prisons, and what are we seeing kind of happen to them long term? Are they rejoining society in a way that's stable, that feels productive, where it looks like they have well-being, or are they then having lifelong challenges after coming out of prison? One of the problems of studying this, of course, is problems often brought someone to prison in the first place. And so, is it having been in prison that then causes problems later in life? Or was it whatever happened before prison that's carrying through prison and continuing to cause problems later in life? But organizations like those that popularized LEAD, I think we're really passionate about the idea that, oh, prison is what's causing these problems. When you come out of prison, then your life falls apart and you can never get it back together. And so they had this idea, well, what if we try to make it so that fewer people go to prison, particularly for drug crimes or prostitution? Let's come up with a way to keep people out of jail and keep people from going to prison. And then let's study and kind of find out what happens. And this research was, I think, an early effort to try to figure out, okay, well, what happens if you don't send people to prison and they remain kind of in what we consider, or I think what I describe as like a light touch social program. Light touch being, there's not a lot of accountability. There's not a lot of, I think, transparency reporting on outcomes, but they're participating. And so now I think we found, and maybe through what we can observe in Seattle, this doesn't seem like it's working very well. And then we can look at their claims, where they've said all along, well, it does. We can prove that it drives fewer arrests in the future, and it drives a reduction in felonies for people participating. People who participate have more jobs. They're more sustainably housed. They're overall better and doing better. But we can look at the research now and say that's not what the research ever said. And it was a misunderstanding of the numbers that led programs like LEAD to conclude that if they did this for people, people would become much better than if they went to jail. And I think now we're seeing that's perhaps just not the case.
So Zimmerman told me that wading through years of the data and research looking at vulnerable populations, which he did long before ever coming to WPC, he knows that vulnerable populations like this, you just don't have that high success rate. It often takes people, especially in coming out of addiction, multiple tries and maybe, steps back to get back in and truly turn their life around. It may take someone who has multiple criminal convictions and yet being given another opportunity for diversion. It's unlikely that they're just going to have that, switch in their mind unless maybe there is some compulsion to do so. And often jail is, that compulsory mechanism that forces them to kind of change their ways, address what it was that got them into that life of crime. But LEAD has been claiming great success, and a higher success rate really, apparently then is proven out based on this analysis from WPC. So, Eric told me he started asking the questions really about claims that others have taken for granted when he attended a recent Seattle City Council meeting and heard the claims and went, "Wait a minute. Do they have the data, the real numbers to back up these claims that they're making?" And claims that are on the internet you can find today. And he said the real concern here is, taxpayers are on the hook for funding these programs, to the tune of tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars every single year here in the state of Washington for these diversion programs based on claims of success. And he says if the numbers really aren't as successful as they're claiming, that we should probably, look at this. And while, creators of these programs may be very well intentioned and have the right heart going in, if it's not working, he suggests that they need to go back and reevaluate and say, okay, maybe this program worked, a little better than this other program. And, we need to reevaluate. So ultimately, he told me he's not at all opposed to social service programs, treatment programs that can help people really change their life and make a course correction to better themselves and life for their family. But he is opposed to spending all of this money on programs that don't have a proven record of success.
I think social programs are important. And I think that, we'll never be a society that is really well itself unless we recognize that there's always going to be people who are in crisis and people who are very vulnerable. And we cannot get rid of that as society. We have to have programs to be sensitive to and engage with people who are in that situation. But we also have to know, are there programs that we have creating more of that? And I think this is the thing. Let's have programs that care for people at risk, people who are in crisis. Let's not have programs that create more people who are at risk and more people who are in crisis. And once we start doing that, I think whether it's programs or state laws or policies in cities where we're a creator of new people who are falling into crisis, I think that's where Seattle's found itself, where King County's found itself, where Washington State's found itself. The legal system here, the changes that we made over the last 10 years, we are creating more people and driving them into crisis. And now we have programs that are insufficient to meeting their needs. That's the cycle we need to break.
I did reach out to the co-creator of the LEAD program here in Washington, a woman by the name of Lisa Dugard, who is none too happy. I'm told from Eric Zimmerman at Washington Policy Center. He said he had a conversation in length with her this morning ahead of them putting up their article, and then my interview with him and my subsequent article to go up on our Center Square Washington page today. I have not received any response from Miss Dugard and the LEAD program media contact. If in fact they do respond before my article goes up, I'm happy to include their comments and hope to include their comments to refute, in fact, what WPC is putting up about the LEAD program. But given the taxpayer investment here, and given, if we're not really transforming lives as this program promises and, tells the rest of the world that we're doing, then that needs to be revealed so that we can, make a course correction on this.